Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. Okay, welcome back everybody. I am in downtown Grafton, I'm not sure if it's downtown Grafton, I'm in Grafton in Auckland, talking to Webby, who is the General Manager of Tech Futures and the Mind Lab, so that sounds flash. Welcome, Fee.
Thank you, Harv. Nice to be here.
Well, it is, because it's your office, so I'm coming to your space. And Fee, thank you for your time today. I have followed your career now for some time and love the space you're in now, and it's been an interesting journey, and we'll get to that. So just tell me, or tell us, please, what does the Tech Futures do, and then what does the Mind Lab do?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the Mind Lab because that's where it all began. So the Mind Lab, we first started teaching children back in 2013. And the idea behind the Mind Lab was to get kids excited about learning again. Because what we'd recognised was the old way of teaching, where teacher stands at the front and dictates their knowledge to a bunch of kids, had totally changed with the rise of technology. So first we started teaching kids things like animation, robotics, 3D design, printing, coding, electronic engineering, with the idea that when you have a hands-on experience, you have an aha moment. And so that was a way of teaching kids and getting them excited about learning again. And what we saw is that within 6 months of having the children's programs, that we recognised that actually the teachers were the ones that we needed to upskill, because they were effectively needing to teach digital native kids, which they hadn't been trained to teach. So we then started teaching teachers on a 9-month program in digital and collaborative learning. And then we started to move into, it's still in the education space, but we...
So just let's go back. So that was what year?
So 2013 was when we launched with the kids.
Yep.
And then 2014 was with the teachers.
Right.
And then over the past 5 years, we've upskilled over 5,000 teachers across New Zealand, from literally Kaitaia to Invercargill, and then as far west as New Plymouth East, Gisborne and Wairoa. So literally all across the country.
I remember when you were in Gisborne. I remember that stage.
Yeah.
I remember you talking to you one day and you just landed in Gisborne and you were getting off the plane there. And I remember you talking about busloads of kids coming down off the East Cape into Gisborne.
Yep. Dead right.
And they were just absolutely pumped to get their hands on some bloody robots and stuff.
Yes, exactly. And the cool thing about the Gisborne or the Tairāwhiti region is, in fact, when you look at the numbers, that group of children and also teachers are now one of the most upskilled in the country. So Gisborne really got behind what we were doing, and likewise Rotorua was another area that really understood where we were going and upskilling. So we did that, and we're not doing teaching kids anymore. So unfortunately, that was one of our impacts of COVID. We actually had a partnership with MOTAT, and when COVID hit, so the Museum of Transport and Technology, so they built us a custom lab out there, and so we had that partnership for a number of years. And then when COVID hit, we just didn't know if the kids were going to be coming back. So that was devastating, because that was that's where we began. That was the start of the Mind Lab. So that was heartbreaking for us. So going back in terms of we taught the 5,000 teachers, we then started to move into the next level. So we brought on a Master of Contemporary Education, because what was happening was all these teachers were suddenly getting excited about their own professional development and their careers, because we were teaching them a different way to facilitate and giving them confidence and skills and knowledge that they'd never had before. And so they were saying to us, wow, I've done this postgrad program, 9 months, I'm really excited, what can I do now? And so we were like, okay, let's do a master's. So
it wasn't just the content fee, it was the way you were teaching.
Absolutely.
So what makes you qualified? What makes you guys qualified to teach that?
So the big part of it was because we had the children, and we teach a different way with the children. So it was very hands-on. It was very give them a problem, get them to do it collaboratively, so in groups. And so what we were seeing was, I guess the kids were our test market. We were teaching a particular way where we don't give them the answers. So it's basically you lead with open questions, and what you want the kids to do is to start pondering and wondering and saying, what if I did this? what would happen if I did this? And how could I do this? And so lots of open questions. And so that particular, what we call pedagogy or way of teaching.
What was the first word?
It's called pedagogy. So it's essentially a way of teaching children.
Okay.
And so we rolled that particular way of teaching out to the teachers as well. And so at first they would come in and they'd say, give us the answers. We want the answers. Right. And we're saying, this is not about us giving you the answers. We give you the platform and the framework and the problems to solve. We introduce you to ways of teaching, but also the theory and the research behind it. And then we get you to go and do things. So they would be doing things with their hands. They would be making robots. And the idea was to bring to life what we call 21st century skills. So collaboration, creativity, innovation, problem solving, building resilience, critical thinking. And so the idea was those skills that we teach the teachers, they can then teach the children, and to get those kids excited about learning again so that the teacher doesn't need to hold all the knowledge. So if you kind of think of a classroom, and I guess the way in which we now, the internet has allowed us to open up and collaborate with people or get knowledge from a different place, what we're saying is the teachers don't need to know all the answers. They just need to know how to facilitate and how to support and how to grow individuals so that they can, go into amazing careers.
Fee, have you had pushback from some teachers?
Absolutely. It's scary. It's because what you're basically saying to them is the way in which you were trained, and that could be 30 or so years ago, is not necessarily relevant anymore. And that's not their fault. The world's moved on. These kids that are coming through are genuinely digital natives. And we know as human beings, change is hard. It's really confronting. And so a big part of what they do on the program with us is they identify their skills and knowledge gaps. And they start to plan out an innovation. They implement that innovation. And then they reflect on what they've done and how they implemented that. It might be their leadership style inside of that. It could be their boss's leadership style. It could be the parents within the community. So the reflective piece is huge. And that's when they suddenly start to recognise, actually, there's real magic in teaching a bit differently and getting their kids excited. Because it's a win-win. If they get their kids engaged and they themselves are then upskilling, they start to grow as humans. But it doesn't happen overnight. It certainly doesn't. But one of the things I love is, we would go into these classes and it would be 4-hour labs on the first night. So, for example, we would go in.
So these classes are after school?
Yes.
In a school or away
We
from
actually now teach them all online, so it's a live facilitated Zoom, but pre-COVID was 4-hour face-to-face sessions. So, for example, we'd go into Hastings or Gore, and we'd be at the local high school or primary school there, and there'd be educators from all around the community, and they would come for those 4-hour sessions. And this happened time and time again. The first night, you'd walk in the door, and you would have teachers in there, and there'd be teachers, AP, assistant principals, deputy principals, etc. And some of them would have arms crossed, and you'd ask them, why are you here? Oh, because my principal sent me. Oh, I have to do this. You'd be like, okay, this could be interesting. And then you have the really, forward-thinking innovators who really want to be there. And then one of the first things we do on the first night is we ask them, what is knowledge, and including, why are you here? And we start getting them working in groups, so it's very collaborative nature, and we start getting them to do something physical. So they might be sitting there with post-it notes and plasticine and all sorts of things that you would have had as a child, and they create a particular scene about what their view on knowledge is, and then they record it on a device. Someone will edit it, and then someone will upload it to a social platform. So by the end of the night, not only have they had really good, robust discussion around a particular topic such as what is knowledge, but they've actually done something. Mm-hmm. They've actually been creative and innovative. They've probably failed many times because they've tried to do something they thought that they could do easily or never done before, like upload a video, edit a video. And then they start to see the magic and collaboration of someone else might have a skill set they don't have, and then they can learn from them. And then they've uploaded a piece of content that they have created themselves. And we're able to say, you can do that inside of your class tomorrow with a particular topic with your children. So it's very tangible. It's very real world. They can take something from a class and straight in the next day.
And what do you reckon the success rate is in a an average group that you are working with? What do you reckon the success rate was with converting people by the end of that session to thinking, we can do this?
This is where I was going, is magic. Literally, you see these people who don't want to be there and their smiles on their face at the end of 1 4-hour session because it's so tangible. They've learnt something, it's been creative, it's been fun. So we make teaching fun again. And that conversion rate, I can genuinely say 99.9% already converted within that first session.
That.
Because it's a real magic in that hands-on learning experience.
Right.
Yeah. So going back to kind of the history, we started teaching the teachers. We then created a master's program, so Master of Contemporary Education. We then moved into another master's, Master of Teaching Education and Leadership, which really focused on low decile schools and people who, it's basically learning on the job, for want of a better word. We then created another few programs. So our most recent one is a postgraduate certificate in Leading Change for Good, recognising that the Western hierarchical, often male-dominated world is changing. And so that's another 9-month program. And then in parallel...
So somebody that comes out of that after 9 months gets... What change will have they gone through in that 9 months?
So a number of different things. Firstly, what we do is we expose them to the idea of what does for good mean? What does authentic value mean? And the cool thing
this
about...
This is a tech bloody course.
Oh, no, this sits under the Mind Lab brand. So
right.
This is more in the education and professional development space.
Okay, so are we now talking about the Mind Lab?
This is still Mind Lab, yep.
Right.
And I'll talk about Tech Futures in a second.
Okay.
So they will come out. So we look at what for good means. We look at what authentic value means. We look at contemporary business models. We look at Indigenous leadership. We look at sustainability. So the idea is we expose these people to a whole new different way of operating, of working, so that they can genuinely lead change inside of their organisations. Because as I was saying before, change is hard. And so we give them the frameworks, the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to be able to lead that change. No matter, and you know what, it's not only in their organisations, it's in their community, it's in their iwi. It could be in a church group. It could be inside a government. A small portion, in fact, of the first cohort were from corporate. So actually this is wider communities. And the reason we did that program is from our teacher program, one particular course of the 4 is around leadership. And what happens with teachers is you walk into the room and you say, who's a leader? And very few of them put their hands up.
Right.
And then we go through a process of unpacking that for them, and they recognise actually they're leading kids, colleagues and communities every day.
Yep.
And we got so much incredible feedback from that particular course. We thought, actually, why should teachers just benefit? We want every community to be able to benefit from that program.
I've come across that with doctors before, Fee, where this guy was head of a department but did not accept that he was a leader and didn't think he had the right to lead other doctors and said they're all self-starters and so forth. It was he just couldn't get over it. And whichever way we dished up leadership to him, it was unacceptable to him.
Yeah,
it was really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame because the guy had some really good skills but would just not take it on. And I never got to the bottom of why. It was obviously some deep-seated thing there in his history or whatever that it was just like, I'm not going there.
Yeah, right.
It's not a thing, and I'm not going to impose myself on other people.
Yeah.
And saying, well, leadership now, you don't have to impose yourself on somebody else. You don't have to be a dictator.
Yeah.
There's another way to do it.
Yeah. And that's what I love about where the time we're living now is that anyone can be a leader. And that's cool. That's definitely different from the way I came up the ranks, where you had to do the hard mahi in order to be able to get to a leadership role. And what we've seen here, even at the Mind Lab and Tech Futures Lab, is some of the best ideas are coming from 25-year-olds, and I love that.
Well, I mean, the most graphic thing of the last 12 or 18 months as Ihumātao, being led by Pānea. I can't remember his second name. Pānea.
Newton, I think.
Newton.
Yeah.
And, the leaders couldn't get traction, so she stepped in and found a different way of doing it. And the people got behind her, and just going, look at that. It's would have that happened before? Dame Fiona Cooper, she had to come through the ranks to get the traction. This young woman just, went for it. And people got behind it. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Quite different. So then the Tech Futures.
Then Tech Futures, yeah. So, Tech Futures came along about 4 years ago. And I remember actually, so our CEO, Frances, she took me out.
Frances Valentine,
yes, she took me out for a drink and we were sort of chatting about, the next year and the future of the Mind Lab, and she said, look, I've got this idea. And she told me about Tech Futures Lab. And this was September, and I remember it was up and running within 6 months of the idea being launched. But her idea was that she had recognised through all of her research and the work that she had done with corporates that the world was changing very quickly, and our businesses and individuals weren't necessarily equipped to face that change, and that change being technology change. So things like automation, artificial intelligence, big data, cybersecurity, thinking fintech, agri-tech. So we were sort of doing the same, but actually she was saying we can't do same.
Fintech, what's that?
Financial technology.
Cool, I knew that. Yeah, so, yeah.
And so it's sort of saying, how do we empower people within their businesses to be ready for these changes so that they don't get left behind and their businesses don't fold. So that was very much focused on corporates but also individuals, and so that started out with one-day corporate innovation or business disruption workshops and introducing people to these technologies and the impact that they may have, both in a positive and a negative way, because it's important to balance that out. But then that morphed into a Master of Technological Futures, so a 1-year masters, which we've now got both a part-time and a full-time option of that too. But what we recognised was that people come for the professional development, but what they leave with is the cherry on the top, which is their personal development, because many of them change paths. They suddenly are exposed to these incredible speakers that will come in and talk about a particular topic, and then they recognise actually they could potentially do something inside of that masters. So it's a hands-on masters. They have an immersion phase where they learn about all the new technologies and they get exposed to these businesses, and then the second part is a project phase. So it's a doing masters. They might go away and prototype a particular idea that they've got, or they might go into further research around that particular idea.
So you guys, obviously, but so the question is, how do you become qualified to teach this stuff, to actually say that, so how do you become qualified for this? So
we partner with a lot of experts. We know that we can't do this on our own. So I guess the beginnings was definitely Frances, because she had has a master's in education management. So she saw a gap in the market. So that was very much led by her, and certainly in the education space. But as soon as we started to open up to things like Tech Futures Lab, recognise that you need experts who are in for example, the AI space or the Internet of Things space. And so what we do is we bring in specialists that will talk about their particular subject areas. We do all the facilitation with our staff. We make it all happen. We create the community of learners, but then we bring in experts. And it's the same thing with Leading Change for Good as well, those programs.
And are those do you find those from the private sector, public, universities?
Combination.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think probably with the Tech Futures Lab, they're predominantly more private sector. But with things like Leading Change for Good, it's certainly a combination of the two.
Yep.
And what we're finding is, perhaps this sounds a little bit arrogant, but people are coming to us. People are saying, I want to be involved with that. I've seen what you're doing. We're particularly seeing it with Leading Change for Good, and people are just reaching out to us saying, can't believe you've created this program. This is exactly what New Zealand needs right now. We've seen this different style of leadership, and this is what we need. Yeah. Okay,
so let's just move the conversation to that. They come to you because why? What do you guys represent that people like?
Change. change, innovation, progression.
Lots of people can do that, Fee.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you guys do that's different to the market?
I think definitely the way in which we facilitate is different. So people get... So you may go to a traditional university and they may get the same lecturer for the whole semester. They may be in a room with 300 other people. What we create here is a very safe learning environment, quite small numbers. So our teacher program might be about 90 per intake, but some of our master's programs are more like 20. And so it's a very safe environment. But then they get exposed to all of these incredible experts that will come in every week. There'll be a different expert. So what we tend to do is we'll do a little bit of theory, and then we'll bring in an expert who will explain their case study and how they've brought that to life. And so it's that exposure.
And expanding that.
Yeah.
And without leading the conversation too much, can we dabble into this trust economy thing at this point? Because I think we are bordering on that. As well, Fee, that you were talking to me last week around this new currency of trust, and it's a fascinating thing because when you're talking there, I'm going, yes, they're coming back to you for more stuff because they trust you, and trust is bestowed on other people. You can't be trustworthy. It's something people give to you, but like mana. Yeah. So what? And because you were talking, it's a fascinating thing. This trust economy. Or currency. Now, especially with the world being so disturbed right now, right, that what is it that we can rely on? What is the thing that actually is not disturbed? Yeah, and trust seems to be coming more and more to the fore. And you were saying last week that we are now the most trusted country in the world?
Yeah, I've got to do a little bit more reading behind it. So I was just having a conversation with Francis, our founder, about it, and I believe that there's a couple of studies that come out. One of them, most recently, is the Chartered Accountancy between Australia and New Zealand have put out a report and looking at trust and saying that New Zealand's got this incredible opportunity to be the trusted place or economy for businesses to come to, and as you were saying, that trust does need to be earned. And trust can't necessarily be done by a robot, So I think it's a new space. We're starting to explore it. I'm certainly no expert, but it's a really interesting space because it makes a lot of sense to us. I think it will make a lot of sense to a lot of New Zealanders right now, particularly our position and how we've come out. We're starting to come out the other side of lockdown, and people are going to be looking at New Zealand and saying, actually, that is a place that I want to go and set up a business because it is a trusted nation. Yeah. The interesting thing is that right now, so we are, in a position where New Zealand is, from what we know right now, we don't have any active cases in New Zealand right now that aren't in quarantine. And the rest in the Northern Hemisphere in particular is ramping up to the highest numbers ever. Going back into lockdown again, aren't they?
And it's worse than it was, before. So, and I look at that, and our Prime Minister trusted our scientists. We trusted the Prime Minister, or the leaders, and there was a huge amount of goodwill there. The second lockdown was more difficult. A
bit harder, yeah.
It was just, do we really have to do this? But that's all based on trust.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because, touching on Jacinda, she'd earned that trust through the two disasters she'd dealt with beforehand. And seeing her standing up there, for me, I go, I trust this. Okay. And I look at Ashley Bloomfield. I don't know how good he is at his job. People say he's very good at his job, but there's no ego there. I go, I trust him. Right? If I had people that I didn't trust there telling me stuff, I'd be going, I'm not sure about this. But on the whole, look, there are lots of people who are unhappy about it, but on the whole, the nation went okay. Yeah, it was quite interesting.
And I think now more than ever, the nation are really understanding it was definitely the right thing to go into lockdown early, go hard, go fast, because we're seeing, I heard on the radio this morning, a national program, they were talking about Belgium, and they're about to go into another lockdown. The UK, I saw some friends on Instagram in the last couple of days saying, this might be our last photo out at a restaurant, and it was sort of hashtag pre-lockdown. So they're obviously things are changing again there as well. And yeah, I think more now than ever we recognise that we did the right thing.
Yeah. And so just to sort of not conclude that conversation on trust, but it's interesting, Fee, that I think that being really shiny and smart, being trustworthy is going to be more recognised than being clever. And I look at, say, let's look, Boris Johnson is quirky and odd, but apparently very clever. But people don't trust him. And so getting the country to follow him is really tricky.
Yeah. Because
a lot of people go, and then when you break the trust, when their politicians were being caught, because it's amazing how quickly, David Clark got caught, and ended up getting sacked. And going, you dick, don't do that.
Yeah.
You're asking us to do that, but you're acting another way.
Yeah.
Kids spot that a mile off.
Totally, it's 101, right?
They just spot that straight away. Mum and Dad say this, but they do that.
Yeah.
And they see it straight away. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. I think, to your point, one of the important things for the COVID side of things was, and to gain our trust was, yes, trusting the science, looking at the data from international and seeing and looking at modelling the data and what could happen to New Zealand, overlaying that with how many respirators do we have in New Zealand. I think it was only 180 at the time, and saying, well, if our over 70s or if our communities in general suddenly have an influx, we're in trouble, trusting that. But also looking at that, and I guess it was getting the insights from that data to then implement the lockdown and the levels. But then, to your point, was actually having Ashley Bloomfield there, I think it was a great move, because it allowed us to see, I guess, maybe the cold face of what was really going on, and hearing it, and he answered well. He greeted, the media well. Consistent, yeah.
Yeah.
And you could tell behind the scenes he was doing the hard mahi there too, and you knew it was authentic.
Yeah. Fee, why do you enjoy your work so much that you're doing now?
For me, probably the biggest part of it would be purpose. I came out of the advertising and marketing world 5.5 years ago, in a place where I was lacking my purpose, and then I went through a bit of professional and personal development and found, once I reached the Mind Lab, I'd found my place, my tribe, and that was very much because it's a purpose-driven organisation. Obviously, when I joined, it was very much in the education space, but still had a young, we were a startup. It was vibrant, it was fun, it was creative. I felt like I had the energy to jump into that and to make things happen. But I loved the fact that it had this purpose of transforming New Zealand's education, and that we had a platform to be able to do that a bit differently to the current education system. So purpose for me was huge. Also, because I'd done a lot of work pre-joining the Mind Lab on my values, once I hit the Mind Lab, suddenly all my values made a lot more sense. They were clearer to me than they'd ever been before. And one of my key values is collaboration. And what I recognised was you can be collaborative and you can be cooperative. I'd been in a industry which was cooperative, not necessarily collaborative.
So explain the difference.
So cooperative is about doing something and being okay with something and partaking. Collaboration is genuinely giving, doing things, doing it together and doing it authentically together. You're collaborating for a greater good. I think about cooperation as just doing it because you kind of have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's funny when you're talking about that, I'm thinking one's getting your hands dirty and committing, and the other one's just handing a spade into the sandpit, but actually not getting in the sandpit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And what process did you go through to get clear on your values?
So I was at Saatchi & Saatchi for 3 years prior to joining the Mind Lab, and during that process, I was in an enviable position where I got chosen to be one of 7 people that went up to New York to do an up-and-comers 4-day conference with Kevin Roberts, who was at the time global COO of Saatchi & Saatchi. And it was quite an incredible few days, and it was some pretty heavy, deep stuff.
What do you mean heavy deep
So
stuff?
quite confronting in terms of presenting, and your presenting style was being critiqued. You were being put on the spot. It was you very quickly saw the flaws in your presenting style, for example. So it was learning in a tough environment. And of course, you've got 6 others from around the world that have been chosen as well, so they are also critiquing you. But one of the things we did was about finding your personal purpose, and it leads into your one-word equity. And it's a series of 10 questions.
One-word equity.
Yeah, OWE. Yeah. So the idea is that you answer these questions and you get to a point where sort of there's one question, one word that describes you. And so the questions, I can't remember all of them, but they sort of start with who do you admire? What pisses you off, for example, and then you go through this series of questions, and you don't necessarily land on the one-word equity to begin with. And I certainly didn't. It took me quite a while, and quite a few people that do this process, it does take some time, like months. But what I loved about that process is it really challenged me to kind of go deep and to go, who am I? What do I stand for? And when you've got it, because people start using the word about you just in general conversation, and you test the questions on your partner or your friends and say, is this my answers to these questions? Do you think I've got these right? Are they accurate? And so, for example, some of the people in our group and wider Saatchi network, one guy was the jeweller. So he would go into a Saatchi business and he would take a business from being okay, he'd polish it up and take it to the next level. We had another guy who was the plumber, who would basically get helicoptered in to clean up the shit. We had another one, I can't remember the actual one word for it, but he was basically the middle child of his family, and he'd found out that he was always the one who would calm the waters. My old strategy head of planning at Saatchi's, Murray Streets, he was the helmsman. So he had ridden the waves through many personal challenges, but also the changes in guard and tide at Saatchi & Saatchi as well, and he certainly was, in my eyes, the helmsman as well. And so where I landed on with mine was the enabler. So everything that I do, I just get barriers out of the way for people, whatever they may be, personal and professional. My being is about allowing people to get through that gate. So I've just got to get those barriers out of the way. And it does change over time. So Kevin Roberts did say, things will happen in your life. You might have children, you might go through a divorce, someone might die, and you kind of look at your personal purpose and those questions again and go, actually, that's changed a bit, and that's totally fine. But I am told that a lot of people don't ever get to that personal purpose piece in their lives. And, I'm glad I was sort of 32 when I started to do some work on it. I wish I'd done it maybe in my 20s. It didn't even feature in my vocabulary. Wasn't something that was discussed. So there was that. There was also an incredible course that I did, which was called Jolt, which was through Mind Warriors. I'm not 100% sure if it's still in New Zealand, but it was a
I remember you going through that.
Yeah, okay. So that was a 9-week program, and I did it with my ASB clients. So there was a couple of positions that were available, and ASB, my client at the time, said, are you interested? And I said, absolutely, because I was going through this real, where do I fit in, who am I, time. And the big output of that was the values piece. So we did a lot of work on the values, and what I identified was, interestingly enough, my values actually were different from the workplace that I was in. And I had some moments where I was just butting heads, and it wasn't until I understood my values that I recognised, actually, I don't actually fit in here, and that was okay. So I sat down with my CEO, Nikki Bell, at the time and said, I think I'm done, and she said, I totally get that, it happens. And so that's when she said, what doors do we need to open? And there were 4 names, and one of them was Francis. So I went to Francis for a bit of career advice. and I left with a job. So there was that. That was the second thing. The third thing was CQ. So I joined CQ when I first came back from London.
Or Collective Intelligence, as it's called.
Collective Intelligence, thank you, Harv, yes. A good friend of mine, Amy Charteris, we had a bit of a discussion when I first came back from London, and she said, Fee, I don't know if you're going to fit in New Zealand. You know, you've come back with all these big, bright ideas, and you've had this great digital career. And
who are you working for in London?
So I worked within the WPP group. So Wonderman was my main agency that I worked at for about 6 or so years there on the Ford account. Ford of Europe was my main client, but I also worked at the Illustrated London News Group for a bit as well. And she said, you're probably not going to fit in, and you might find that New Zealand's sort of quite small and people patch protect, and you may not be able to kind of get in the door. She said, I'd highly recommend that you join Collective Intelligence and get exposure to other brains and ways of thinking and diversity, and to kind of help you on your journey. And so I did. And so
no, you didn't.
That was 2011.
You took months or a year to join.
Oh, did I?
You did.
Did I really?
Yeah,
I don't even remember.
You were so busy. I couldn't just. It was just no. I'm
Couldn't
too
pin
busy.
me down.
You were just no. You were so frenetic. And I remember the first meeting you got.
Yeah.
It was in Havelock North.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And you were just on your phone the whole time.
Yeah.
God,
yeah.
you were just.
Yeah, it was. Frenetic's a good word for it.
You were so
It was
busy.
Big hours, huge hours. And actually, I guess another turning point was, I'm going to forget her name, but I'm going to say Jane, one of your facilitators.
Mm-hmm.
And
Jane O'Shea, I think at the time.
Was it Jane? Yeah. And we met at Saatchi's, and I can't even remember why she was there. But anyway, we sat down, we got chatting and talking about kind of where I was at with Saatchi's and doing these huge hours. And she said to me, Fee, have you ever heard of Brené Brown? I said, no.
Oh, so this will be Sue. This will be Sue Johnson.
Okay.
Sue Johnson.
And I said, no. And she said, I'd love you to have a watch of this 18-minute TED Talk around vulnerability. And I was like, oh, what's vulnerability? And she said, just trust me. I think it's worth, where you're at with your life of watching that. Anyway, I remember that night ringing my sister and talking to her about, this person from Collective Intelligence that had said to me, I think you need to find your vulnerability. And I said to my sister, what the fuck is vulnerability? Just, again, wasn't in my vocab. And she was like, I don't know. We had this kind of funny conversation. And then I watched the TED Talk.
Because it's a weird word.
It is. But I watched the TED Talk and I was like, oh, shit. Okay, this changes everything. And I had a real aha moment of my control freakness was just staring back at me in a mirror, bigger than ever. And my realisation was my whole career had been, because I'd been in the digital space, we all learnt together. When the internet came about, when e-commerce, mobile marketing, email marketing, social media, I was at the beginning of pretty much all of that. And so we had to learn together. And it was so quick. You had to learn, you had to get your head around it, And so what it meant that although we were all sort of learning together, I didn't want any ball to drop. And so when I came back to Saatchi after being in London, I went onto the ASB account. So that was one of our biggest clients at the time, and to really boost the digital space because they were a very digital, innovative, progressive client. And so I had a great, incredible team at Saatchi's that I worked with, but I was a complete control freak. Just wouldn't give people autonomy to do their thing. I was across everything, absolutely everything. And then watched Brené Brown and I was like, oh, crikey, that's me. So that was a real turning point as well. And I still share that video with people who I see who are in that same
Sophie, what
space.
did you change? Like when you say that aha, what was it? What was the thing that dropped?
So it was definitely a series of things. I wouldn't, and I say, the collective intelligence, the jolt, the values piece, the bit with Kevin Roberts, seeing the video. I then also had a staff appraisal with my boss, Nikki Bell at the time. She wrote me a letter rather than doing the appraisal, and the letter was basically, if you continue like this, you'll kill yourself. You can't continue doing these crazy hours and being such a control freak. And so it was a series of just slap in the face. And I think with the strength, the courage, coupled with my CQ group at the time, they did a deep dive on my journey at Saatchi's, and it was very clear that I was in the wrong place, and that came down to values, that I was trying to do something that wasn't going to happen. And as I said, collaboration being one of my key values was that I was with cooperative people, not necessarily collaborative people. And so then the deep dive really, I think everyone came in December, and I was gone by January. So it was
Fee, I remember I facilitated the group when you first joined, and I remember about maybe the third or fourth meeting, and we have written updates for the listeners who don't know, but written updates coming out. And normally an update would be roughly a page long. And you'd written an update, and it was 4 pages long. And I'm looking at this, and I said Fee, came to your update, I said, great update, Fee. Do you think anybody else read it? And you're like, what? I said, there's just so many bloody words in it. It was just like tiring just reading it.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal how deep you were in that frenetic space.
Yeah.
And this, I'm just reading this thing and just go, oh my God, I got cross-eyed by the end of reading the bloody thing. And we did this and this and this.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. Why were you like that?
I think it was the industry. It certainly was so fast-paced, and in advertising there is no real room for error or for failure. So I think that was probably a part of that. Whereas here, I think about the Mind Lab, we move very quickly, and with that we say we're not always going to get it right, because we've got a certain window to ensure that we transform education, but also that we look after New Zealand's businesses, and that we upskill them so that they don't fall over, and that they can very quickly move from an analogue world to a digital world. So with us, we know that we're going to fail in some things, and if things don't work, we won't flog a dead horse, we'll move on. I've been in agencies before where you keep certain clients who may not necessarily treat you well or pay you what you're worth, but you keep them because they're a good brand to have on your books. And that's at kind of loggerheads with me, because I only want to work with good people who come from a good place. And when you're not being treated well by other human beings, that doesn't sit well with me. And so I think failure within that advertising industry it is talked about, but it's probably not preached as much as it could be. And look, I can see why it's come about. I think in the digital space it's slightly different, because if a website goes live and it's got a bug in it, you can very quickly change it. If a television ad goes live and it's got a spelling mistake in it, shit's going to hit the fan. So I think that is the nature of the business, for sure. But I think, unfortunately, traditionally advertising has also been very, very hierarchical, that you have to do the hard mahi in order to climb the ranks, and that is, unfortunately, has been done, is perceived through hours. It's not necessarily through the work that you do.
Right.
It's being there when the lights are still on and it's dark outside.
Yeah. And look, the whole aura of the madman type phase, all that sort of carry on, it was a thing, wasn't it? That if you in that industry, you were special and you were crazy, and you did stuff that other people didn't do.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong, I loved it. It taught me so much. I don't regret a single moment. I'm glad that I've moved on, definitely. But oh God, it was amazing. I kind of got into the digital space when I was 22. And I was young, and gosh, I learned so much so quickly, and because it was moving so quickly, I loved that. And then kind of moving into the advertising space was another new, I guess, move for me. So I was constantly learning. But I think more than anything, my time at Saatchi's, I learned more about myself. That was a big kind of a personal learning journey, more so than, I guess, a professional. Ultimately, it becomes professional, of course, but a lot of my learning in the digital space was actually in London. For sure. Yeah.
Fee, just going back to this, being called up to New York to be part of the 7, that must have been pretty good for the ego.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was nervous as hell. I was a bit of a mess because I was, a little old New Zealander flying up and being with the Brits and the Americans, etc. And I was, the only one that was flown premium. I don't even know if I was... No, I was definitely premium. Everyone else was talking about their business class fares. I was like, oh, that's nice. But it was intimidating. I knew people who'd been through it before, and they said, buckle up, prepare yourself. And, there's stuff, you're put on the spot a lot and you have to think on your feet. And some of the things I learnt the hard way. But I think one of the things I also took out of that was not only a lot about myself, but just little frameworks. When I think about when I write a presentation, I now have a framework in my head in case the presentation doesn't load, for example. And that was one of the learnings, because one of the presentations that I did, I had my notes with me, and Kevin came up and took them out of my hands, and of course my head went blank. And he was like, you're going to learn the hard way, but you've got to know that you might be put on the spot, or your presentation might fail, and you need to know what's in that presentation, and you need to know your stuff. So it sounds quite full on, and it was at the time, but it taught me some lessons, and it's stuff that I've taken with me.
Look, Fee, we had that nearly happen last week when we had Alex Hannant presenting on last Thursday, and I was the host on Zoom, but he had the slides, so I had to make him the host, right? Easy enough. And I didn't have my mouse, just had the pad and the sofa. I'm sitting in the BNZ. And lo and behold, I made somebody else the host with a slip of the bloody, and I didn't know the other person, and so I had to ask permission. And I just came clean. I said, this is my worst nightmare right now. Yeah. And I'm looking at Alex and going, you've delivered this to 1,000 people so far, son. You better be good enough to deliver this without the slides, because we got it sorted out within about 10 seconds, which seemed like a lifetime. But, it was interesting just watching Alex and just going, I can do this without the slides. And I thought at the time, if we can't get this sorted, it's for a reason. Once upon a time, I would have just gone into a complete flap, and even when I had recovered it, my heart would have been still racing, but I've got better at just going, oh, look, this shit happens, and, what can I retrieve from it? Yeah. And it's meant to be for a reason. I don't know what it is. I
tell you what often works well in those situations, if it comes up, is that power of collaboration, of asking the community. And you'll be surprised if someone will jump in and go, oh, yeah, have just top right-hand corner, click,
Well, I just came clean straight away.
Because it's easy to freak out for yourself, isn't it? Sit there and go, oh, what am I doing?
Yeah, I just came clean. I said, hey, guys, I've cocked up here.
Yeah.
And I've just got... And it was an older woman, and it was, anyway, it was quite clear there was every chance she wasn't going to get it sorted out.
Yeah.
But she did.
Awesome.
And very, very pleased. What's it like working here, Fee? What's it like working at Tech Futures in the Mine Lab?
So every day is different, it's fair to say. A big part of what we do is spotting gaps in the market and creating programs or seminars or workshops around that. So I'll give you an example. Late last year, we recognised that the world had officially gone from analogue to digital, and we hadn't necessarily taken our business owners on that journey, particularly New Zealand's small businesses, and even people that are in big corporates as well. And so we looked at that insight, we did some research around it, and we created a program called Digital Skills for the Workplace. And that's to help businesses and anyone who's really wanting to upskill. So everything that we do is based on insight or a need, and the idea is that we are progressing New Zealanders so that New Zealand does not get left behind. So every day we're kind of thinking about what could those new insights be and how can we create impactful futures for people. We have people coming and going the whole time. So because we teach a lot at night, pretty much between 4 and 8 p.m, we have people coming and going. So if people are teaching in the evenings, they might come into the office at midday. So we have a very flexible working culture. Since COVID, in fact, before COVID, we thought, yep, we're pretty flexible, but in fact, since COVID, we're more flexible now than ever. We have a lot of people that will choose to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, or if something comes up, naturally children are going to get sick or animals are going to get sick. One of my colleagues at the moment has got an animal that's very unwell at the moment. She's working from home. It doesn't change anything. She's still doing her role. We've got lots of things we can do on Zoom. She can work from home. She can have conversations on the phone. It doesn't matter. We actually have a lot of staff that work remotely. So as far south as Dunedin, as far north as Kerikeri. And we've got one particular program, our Master of Contemporary Education, where all of their staff, bar two, are outside of Auckland. And it runs incredibly well. So yeah, it's from a culture perspective, we're always a work in progress. We're always looking to see what we can do with our staff. An example being, we have a health and wellbeing team. We meet once a month and we come up with ideas about how we can look after staff and really improve the culture. At the moment, we have a sunflower growing competition. So every staff member got sent sunflowers. It's very competitive. People are uploading their images and their videos on Slack and commenting. We have prizes that will be at the Christmas party.
How tall are the sunflowers?
Oh, mine at the moment are less than a metre.
Ah.
But they will get very large. Last week we launched the pumpkin carving competition for Halloween. So there's kind of fun things like that. I'm currently working with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei to create cultural tours for all of our staff. So Ngāti Whātua is our local iwi, and we have a relationship with them. And so we're sending all of our staff through a 4 to 5 hour cultural tour. So they'll start in central Auckland, they'll go to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, they'll go to Bastion Point, they'll go to Mangawhau, and then they'll have kai at the bottom of Mangawhau. And that's really about making sure that our staff know where we're from and where we're connected from a Grafton perspective, and also to strengthen our relationship with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei as well. And so that's an example of how we are strengthening, I guess, our people through professional development opportunities, and making sure that knowledge can then be spread amongst the team, but also to our what we call our learners, our students on our programs as well.
Fee, you are a white girl from the Wairarapa, off a farm.
Mm-hmm.
That's a far cry from there now.
Yep.
What's it like going home?
So I love going home. So Martinborough is home. Mum and Dad were farmers, cattle, sheep and deer farmers with 1,500 acres out on the White Rock Road. They sold the farm in often parts over a series of years and then moved into town, into Martinborough, and built there about 5 or so years ago. They themselves are probably the happiest I've ever seen them. I think retirement suits them really well. Mum was originally a city girl, so being in the town with close to all her friends and playing golf and tennis and biking in to see her friends is a great spot for her because she's been out on the farm for so many years. I love going home because we are a very close family. We do actually meet in Taupō fairly regularly as well. My sister lives in Taupō with her husband and 2 kids, so it's a good place for me to meet. I'll be pretty honest, Mum and Dad don't really know what I do, and that comes from even when I was first in the digital space, because, the internet was new, they were like, what is mobile, what is e-commerce? I was kind of using words that just were not in their vocab. So we don't tend to talk too much about what I do. However, I know that when they do attempt to talk about what I'm doing, they're very proud. Most recently, there was an article that was published in the Verve magazine up here, and in it I paid tribute to them. So a couple of things. Mum has always been great at saying to me, you can change, you can do whatever you want to do. I had a number of occasions in my career where, one, I changed from a career which I thought I'd trained to do, which was interior design, and then I went into the digital space. And I remember ringing her going, I'm going to resign, I don't like this place. She was like, darling, the world's your oyster, you can do whatever you want to do. That moment in time, she could have said the opposite, and I could have been in a big dark place. But she gave me the confidence and the belief that I could do anything. And the same thing happened again when I was made redundant from probably my second ever company. I worked for an internet service provider in the city, and I was the 3rd to be employed and then the 20th to be made redundant in the space of 10 months. And I was gutted. And I remember driving up College Hill and in Auckland, and I was bawling my eyes out, and I rang Mum and I was like, I've just been made redundant. She was like, oh, darling, the world's your oyster. You can just go to London and be with your sister. And literally within 3 months, I was in London. So that was definitely a turning point, and I pay real homage to them for particularly for Mum, for giving me that opportunity to see that it was okay to do other things. In my world, in my eyes at the time, it was failure. On reflection, it certainly wasn't. It was pivoting. It was the squiggly line journey that many of us have. And I pay homage to Dad is very much around trusting my gut.
Right.
So a big part of my leadership style is trusting my gut, and that's very much around being able to get to know people as human beings to then be able to make the right call. And when I haven't trusted my gut, I've got it wrong, 100%. So that's been huge. So yeah, there's definitely, they are really proud. I think they would love it if all of us moved a bit closer. But also we've all now got kids, and they love having the excuse to come up here and see them as well. Yeah.
Fee, it's close. I'm just bringing up a photo here while you're talking. Because I was thinking, what fabulous support you had from your parents, because lots of kids don't get that. I certainly didn't have anything like that, and I'm going, wow, that would have been awesome to have. Mine was a different generation, but certainly wasn't expensive, and it was very, very conservative. I was at AUT earlier, catching up with one of our scholarships down there, and they had a blackboard there, and there was this wonderful cartoon. It's got failure is success and progress. I took a photo, and I thought that's very cool.
Yeah.
How fluid your mother was, just going, that means something else turns up.
Yeah, and I think what it came down to is she was a daughter of a lawyer, and she worked in his practice for a bit. She also worked in a fabric shop. A lot of her friends were nurses or dental nurses, and then she married Dad at 21 and went to Martinborough, and you didn't go into town much, and she was there, age 23 with her first child, and Mum always laughed. She's like, I was a child bride. But what she saw was opportunity. And I think, had Mum lived in our generation, she would have been creative. She would have done something in the creative space. And she saw the opportunities that we had. And I think that was very much about saying you can do anything in comparison to the opportunities that they had and what was expected of them. Mum raised us when Dad was on the farm and did an incredible job. Obviously, we all went to boarding school at a very young age. My brother was 10, I was 11, and my sister was 12 because we lived kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so we always knew that. But, Mum's job, was to raise us and to look after us. But as I said, had she had her time again, she definitely would have done something creative.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I reflect, my mother, I don't think, would have had children in this day and age.
Yeah.
Right? I think she would have taught history.
Yep. And
she loved history. Being a mother was something that she never enjoyed.
Yeah.
I look at a lot of different generations. I look at my mother-in-law now, and I've often said to Kate, I wonder what she would do if she was a teenager now, because she was a very dedicated mother and farmer's wife.
Yes.
She's slightly crazy in a really good way.
Yeah.
And she's got a big brain, and she's really capable of doing stuff. And she expressed it in other ways in the local community. But I go, wow, I wonder what would have happened if you'd had, a different generation.
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating to see.
Oh, even like Frances in some of her presentations, she always goes to Seek, which is the website for jobs, and she'll type in something like computer scientist or data analyst or artificial intelligence. And literally, there are thousands and thousands of jobs that are coming up in this space. If you showed that to a generation above us or two, what on earth are these jobs? And I guess that's a part of our role here at the Mind Lab and Tech Futures Lab, is to say, look at what the opportunities are out there, and to sort of say to parents, let go. It's okay to let go. Your kids are not necessarily going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, or what you were, whatever your profession was. They can actually do some incredible things out there. You've got to give them the platform and the confidence to fly.
So you guys teach adults a lot.
Yes, yeah. So predominantly, average age is sort of about that 47 mark. Yeah.
And because I'm really interested in the space of people recreating themselves, right? And it's some people seem to be able to do it and some don't.
Yeah.
What do you reckon it is about the people you teach that they have this ability to recreate themselves or retrain?
I think a lot of them come to us because they know what they're currently doing needs to change, but they don't know how to change it and they don't know what that looks like. And then they'll have an interview with one of our staff members and they'll be like, yeah, that sounds like me. And then we talk about mindset a lot. So growth mindset is something we talk about with our students and our staff a lot. You have to be open. You've got to have that growth mindset. You've got to be curious and open up to new knowledge, new ways of doing things, new ideas, critical thinking, diversity of thought as well. And I think there's real magic in people opening up and being ready for that.
What gets in the way of that?
Often the industry or the environment that they're working in. So they may not be in a space where it's okay to fail, or innovation might not be, research and development or innovation may not be something that their company invests in or sees that it's worth investing in, or they might be in a company where the professional development is not seen as something that they should invest in. And so often these people will put themselves through our programs off their own back. And they range from, I think our lowest program is $295 through to a $15,000 master's.
Wow.
So they vary greatly. But a lot of the time it's the individuals themselves saying, I know that something has to change. Yeah.
And Fee, what do you think employers are looking for? The modern employer now, what are they looking for?
So it's a lot of it sits in this sort of the C-suite. So creativity, that kind of out-of-the-box thinking, definitely problem-solving. I think we can just look at this year and with COVID and what we've been presented with. People need employees to be problem-solvers. I think collaboration, as I was saying earlier, one of my key values is collaboration. They need people who are willing to collaborate with people, and that's either internal or external. It could be, public-private partnerships. It could be inter-school. It could be intergeneration. It could be, working with local iwis that they may not have done before, and really kind of looking inside themselves to be able to go, what are those skills? Curiosity is a big one. You want people to ask questions and to be curious. What if I did this, or how could we do that? And just looking at things and going, that doesn't really work. Do you think we could change it? I love that. I love it. Actually, we've got the person's desk who I'm sitting in right now. We've got a new director of studies that's joined, and one of the first things I said to her is, put an eye over everything we're doing and challenge us on it. We're still a new business, but we've also we're guilty of falling into the trap of just doing things because that's how we've done it, and yet we're still young. So I said, challenge us, and I love it. She's coming back and she's like, I've uncovered this. Why do we do this? And I'm like, oh, good question. That's shocking, but it's giving them the platform to be curious and be critical as well. And I think being okay with critical thinking. It's very easy to get defensive when someone gives you critical feedback, but actually, if it's delivered in the right way, it allows you to grow. So with that critical thinking, a big one for me is being self-reflective. So we teach teachers every day to be self-reflective and to look at their practice and to try something and then evaluate how it went and look at their particular style through doing that. We do the same thing with our staff here, as being self-reflective. So the first thing they do when they do their staff appraisals is they actually go through a document and answer a series of questions, and it's all about being self-reflective, and then it goes into planning their next 12 months. They then sit down with their managers and they basically have a korero, have a conversation about their particular staff appraisal and how it's a collaborative appraisal, if you like, but it starts with the individual being self-reflective and things that worked and didn't work and why and how they could improve them.
Interesting thing with curiosity is that without courage, curiosity is toothless, because to be truly curious, you have to be brave. Yeah. Because you're going to find shit you don't like. Yeah. And then you're going to go, so now what am I going to do? Yeah. And people forget that. They think curiosity is, being curious about the big wide world. That's okay, that's fun. Being curious about people who don't agree with you, that's a bit more uncomfortable. And then being curious about, why are you such a dick? The number of times I think, oh, for fuck's sake, why? Again, why have you done that? And, yeah, that's a whole, that can be really unpleasant.
And I think it's also, to your point, is having the courage. So I've been in situations before where you could, on paper, think that someone is being curious because they're throwing ideas.
Yeah.
But they're cannonballs. There's no substance behind it. They're just sort of disrupting, and it's kind of like
junk.
It's kind of junk. Yeah. So there's definitely a way of doing it that's genuine and that comes with sort of substance. And I guess that's
and it's got to be systematic, Fee. So the thing with curiosity is that I think it's a skill that needs to be learned, and going and so we ask this question, okay, and then we reflect, and so. Then the next bit and the next bit. And so, our logo with Collective Intelligence is based off a thing called the adjacent possible. And the adjacent possible is actually it's a discipline of saying, okay, so here is the problem, and we put the problem in a room. And in that room, often people will only have one door out of that room. We've got a problem, we've got one door, we go through that. The adjacent possible is saying, well, actually, no, there's 8 different rooms you could go out, right? So let's explore how many ways could we tackle that problem, right? And go, okay, so there's not just one way, there's 6 different ways. So that's 6 doors. So if we go out that door, what's there? If we go out that door, what's there, right? And these doors all lead into different places, right? And so we go, okay, we're going to pick that door and go out through that. Or we might pick 2 doors, right? And let's go and have a look at that. And that puts you in the next room. And so, for me, curiosity actually needs to be used to go from here to there, to there, to there, and they connect. Because if you jump way, way out and there's no connection, that's junk, right? Because you're out in no man's land and there's no connection. So the adjacent possibles are, and it fascinates me, and it's bloody hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
It kind of, when you were saying that, it kind of made me think about one of the things that we did with Collective Intelligence years ago, which was that art of asking great questions. And it comes to me a lot when you ask a question that's a yes/no, and you kick yourself because you literally get the yes/no answer back. And you're like, that needed to be an open-ended question,
And you go, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah, and it's that because that allows you to keep digging and digging and asking more and getting kind of closer to it. And that's obviously one of the strengths of Collective Intelligence, is to be able to unpick the layers or peel back the layers to keep going and keep digging and keep asking. And obviously we get permission to do that.
And then the key with that is not to pretend you know the answer. So when I started Collective Intelligence and I facilitated, I was so insecure, I had to know what the outcome was going to be at the end of the day and then just drive the outcome to that, And I'm not going to say I was ashamed of that because it was just, it was new and I was playing with shit that I didn't know how to do. And the point of that is to actually go along not knowing and keep digging. You've actually got to be quite secure in your own personal base to go, we're going, I was going to say where no man's gone before. I won't say that. We're going into a space we don't know what the answer is, and we have to be personally okay with that we end up in a space, go, okay, so here we are, and I know nothing about that, and I'm not the expert, and we've ended up in a space, and I might not be relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And I might have to hand that over to somebody else, which is the collaboration thing, right? Going, okay, we're over there, and I'm no use anymore, and I've got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
What people generally do is go, well, this is uncomfortable, I'm going to steer it back to where I'm actually relevant and in power.
Yeah.
Such a different space.
Yeah. And also that being okay with those uncomfortable silences. So that's magic too, because it's easy to jump in to answer or finish off what you want them to say.
We had 2 years ago, Bettina joined the company. She's fabulous, and she came to our first training day with the facilitators. So there were 8 facilitators there, and Karen was there, and Martina, and we had Mary Beth involved in the company at that stage. And about a third of the way into the day, a question was posed by Mary Beth. And everybody just sat there and went, nobody said anything. Silence. And unbeknownst to me, Bettina in her head is going, fuck, am I supposed to be saying something?
Yeah,
Nobody said anything. Am I supposed to be, what? What was the question? What's going on? And there was just complete silence. And nobody was uncomfortable. Everybody just sitting there going, you know. And she said, I was just freaking out while he's just going, why isn't somebody talking? And the other thing that she was really interested in, that we didn't have any detailed agenda. We had some points that we wanted to get through and the main things. And we finished early.
Yeah.
And she said meetings that she had been to, there'd just been this jabber the whole way through, a big, intense agenda, lots of jabber, ran over time, and what did we get done? It's a fascinating thing.
It's interesting, actually, because we have a thing at the Mind Lab called Manaaki Whono, and it's a group that gets run across all of our programs for our Māori and Pacifica students to come and just to talk and to discuss. So it's the idea that you come to talk about nothing in order to get to something. And it's incredibly rewarding for not only our staff, because they get to know what's really happening with the students, but also for the students. They may have a niggle, but they don't really know what that niggle is, and they come and they chat. And it's incredibly powerful. And also, just to close the loop on what you were saying with that no agenda, we do that with our leadership team. If someone's got something that they want to talk about, then they pop it into a doc during the week. But otherwise, we all join a Zoom call and we craft the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Who's got things they want to and then we can go and just chat about stuff. And yesterday we had one, we finished 40 minutes early. We have a 2-hour session. And it's interesting if you don't have a really tight agenda where it can go. And then it allows people to remember things, go, oh, actually, and be okay with that, and have the environment that people can add things to the agenda on the go, and not feel that, oh, it wasn't on the agenda, I can't bring it up. It's not for everybody.
No, look, but the thing is, you've got to be, so, our board meetings are finishing early. We had a 3-hour board meeting, we finished in 2 hours, and the chair said, we've done it, haven't we? We're there. And yeah, cool, we end the meeting right now because we've got where we needed to be.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to carry on. It's an interesting thing that just actually turning up in that space is different without so much structure, because I think you've got to be more switched on, because you can't rely on this agenda.
I think one thing to be mindful of is introverts versus extroverts as well. So I'm quite mindful of the fact that we've got a couple of people that I work really closely with who do like me sending things in advance for them to have a bit of a think about and then come, and I'm very aware of not putting them on the spot. But I guess that's about kind of really getting to know your staff and knowing how to communicate with them and what works for them, and not putting them in that position where you're expecting them to think on the spot when actually their personality type and their way of thinking and communicating, it needs a little bit more time. Because I'm certainly an extrovert that thinks on their feet, and that does not work for everybody.
No.
So that's definitely... I mean, I ended up marrying an introvert, for crying out loud, so I've had to learn a lot along the way.
Well, Fee, I'd just like to say, I'd like to take some credit for you actually bloody getting married, because when I met you, you were unmarriable.
Thanks, Harv. No, that's a fair point, I was, yeah. There was nothing left to give.
There was nothing left to give, yeah.
No.
So, Fee, before we round... So I'm just going to actually congratulate you on that, Fee, for getting out of that space, because that space can be really addictive, and I see people who absolutely could not get out of that space, that they would rather, I'm not sure they think about it, but they not would rather die, but them actually dying on the job is an outcome that happens.
Well, I think that was my first CQ meeting. You looked me in the eye and pointed at me and said, you know what your problem is? You've got an addiction. You're addicted to work. I remember that really clearly. It'll stick with me forever.
Yeah,
wasn't
my finest
pretty
hour.
brutal, but do you know what? It was at the time. It was what I needed for sure. But yeah, I can definitely say that the CQ journey has allowed me to move on and to find my place. And I guess gave me the platform and the courage to move, because I think, to your point, that addiction space, when you're in an industry or an environment that is so fast paced and you just work, it's too scary to step out, because you're like, what will happen if I step out? And you do need to have people around you, and obviously for me, the platform of CQ to back you and to say you can do this, this, and this. You've got the confidence and the platform to go.
We ran an event in Taupo some years ago for the Catwalk Trust. We had that golfing event, right, to raise money for the Catwalk Trust. And Fee McLeod, you were unmarried then, Fee McLeod turns up at that. And I looked across and we were just about to kick off, and you were talking on your phone in this very intense, you had a putter in your hand, and you were just totally immersed in such and such and some. And I thought, what the fucking point actually coming here, Fee, that you've brought all this shit into this wonderful event and whatever. And I just looked and I thought, man, I wonder if she's ever going to get out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So, Fee, well done.
Thank you.
Before we sign off, Fee, one of the things that you wanted to talk about was this Indigenous space and the attributes of that and the leadership styles and so forth. So before we wrap up, what?
So I guess it's come about not only from our teacher program, but more recently a program that we launched, Leading Change for Good. And the reason we launched that was looking at the different styles of leadership. And, we've come from, or we've been immersed in, a very Western, hierarchical, often male-dominated...
It's called patriarchal.
Way of working, right? And that's sort of what we've been brought up with. But it's not necessarily the only way, and it's not necessarily working for everybody. And so a big part of the Leading Change for Good program is we look at Indigenous leadership, so both Māori and Pasifika, and really look at their ways of leading, the values-based leadership, the fact that they will look behind in order to go forward, that everyone succeeds together, that it's very collaborative, it's very community-based, and it's really interesting watching that unfold, the power in Indigenous leadership and the case studies and the stories that people are sharing, not only from the guest speakers that we have that are coming in, but also from the cohort, the students that are actually on their journeys, and recognising that they themselves, whether they are Māori, Pasifika or European, are actually looking at their heritage and their past and recognising that they can do something different, and that looking at what Māori and Pasifika do is something that they can benefit from, and being open to their ways in their communities. So it's a very exciting space for us, and it's very rewarding. And even at the beginning of the year, as a company, we made a pledge to really look at our own teaching and learning strategy and what that meant for our learners, and that's all learners, so whether you're old or young or whatever background you may be from. And so with that, a strategy was created called Te Ara Kotahi, which is our teaching and learning strategy. And the thing I love about this is it started at grassroots. It started with the Māori and Pacific team, success team coming together, and the teaching and learning team coming together, saying, we feel like there needs to be a real strategy that supports all our learners, but also is backed by all of the organisation to ensure that no one gets left behind and everyone is supported through their learning journey. And so with that, we actually have a graduation pin, which is a little a wooden pin that we give out to all of our graduates, but all our staff have it. And it's a little triangle, and at the top is the kotahi. And then we've kind of got the summit, and it's about everyone working together to succeed. In the middle of it, we have the shark's teeth, so the noho taniwha, and that's all about making sure that we are kind of we're all working together. We're gritty. And then we've got the actual learner in the middle of it, which is the koru. And so with that, the thing I love about that is it started from grassroots. Then the last kind of team to review it or to do the implementation plan around it was actually the leadership team. And it kind of showed me that we were practicing what we preach when it comes to leading change for good. It's not a leadership team saying, we have to do this strategy and you have to do it this way. It came from a really good place of making sure that our learners are looked after. And so I think that as we have embraced this space more and more and also created a stronger partnership with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, it's starting to really make a lot of sense to not only our staff but also our students as well. So we're not done yet. We'll never be done. It's a work in progress. We're not perfect. We're always learning. And I'm constantly, like I was on a Māori and Pacific student success working group just before you joined. And, I was putting some challenges out to the team and saying, I need to know more about this space. I need your help. Please give me some advice. I don't want to get it wrong. And that's very much, that's very true when we have our kind of Pākehā paralysis. But I'm finding myself being open and being vulnerable, but knowing that it's a space I need to be better in and I need to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it adds a whole richness to our lives, doesn't it, when you actually get included, get involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It is. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I think we're all better because of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I've written down here for you was that, this, we need to find a way where success can be shared because success has not been shared. And success has been hoarded away in lots of different ways. And that's the patriarchal system, and it's about survival of the fittest and all that sort of thing. And, I won't get into it because that's a whole other topic altogether, but yeah. Fee, before we sign off, is there anything else we've missed? Is there anything you want to add to this podcast?
No, I just think that it's a delight. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a privilege to be able to share the story of the Mind Lab and Tech Futures Lab and to add in the layer of my journey for sure. And as I said, that CQ's been collective intelligence has been a huge part of that journey. And in fact, when we met last week, one of my collective intelligence colleagues said to me, I hope you're not going to leave, And I was like, no way. And she's like, you're just in such a good space at the moment. I said, the reason I'm not going to leave is because there's peaks and troughs. Me a year ago needed a kick up the backside because I thought I was done here. I was like, have I reached my glass ceiling? Is this it? And I happened to have a team day that coincided with those feelings. I think I'd just run the New York Marathon, so I came off a massive high. And then I was sort of like, am I still into this? Do I need to start looking around? And then the team came in and did a deep dive and gave me some really good advice and a bit of a kick. And a big part of it was you need to decide whether you're in or out. And if you're in, you're 100% in. Right. And you find those opportunities and you got to thrive or you piss off ski, Right. And it was the kick I needed. And, as I say, you have peaks and troughs. So for me, I think I've been in there since 2011 when I got back from London. Maybe it was 12, given what you said earlier. Maybe I took a year to get on. I've loved it.
And Fee, we can't talk about the details, but I would like to congratulate you on your design of the feedback with your team last week. And because I've had the feedback come in, and it's worked.
Right.
And it's possibly one of the edgiest pieces of feedback I have ever heard of in our journey.
Yeah.
And, you're in very capable hands with Dallas being the facilitator, so I've got full confidence in Dallas and would have said no if she didn't think it was going to work. Yeah. But it would appear, Fee, by the feedback that it has worked. And congratulations.
Well, I think the main thing is that, our group is firing on all four cylinders, which is amazing, but also that there is huge trust and there is everyone's got each other's back. And I think that you wouldn't do that in a team that's not firing. We took a risk, but we looked at the risks of presenting feedback back that way and we, collectively decided that it would work. So, it's nice to be obviously a part of helping and hopefully changing people's lives. It's a big part of what we do.
Well, it would appear that there's change underway. Yeah. Excellent. Fee, thank you for your time. You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider, or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.